Welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to our session, Muting Disengagement. We are encouraging you to view this session directly from its YouTube page so that you can chat live along with our presenters and viewers. You can find it on our YouTube channel at TheEdCollab or at gathering.theedcollab.com. If you don't see the chat, please refresh your browser. And your chats mean a lot to our presenters today, so please actively participate. And just a reminder, the gathering is an inclusive and affirming environment. We will be actively monitoring the chat, and you can help by reporting accounts to YouTube. Today, we are so pleased to welcome Cris Tovani and Sam Bennett to the stage for their session, Muting Disengagement.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Is anybody even here? We think it's just Tawanda, maybe.
Yay, team.
Yay, team is right. Oh, well, here we are. This wonderful afternoon of learning. I love this topic of unmute. I love unmuting myself.
Yes, you do.
And it's been so fun to just listen to the sessions this morning. So I'm Cris Tovani, and I am a secondary teacher and instructional coach. And I'm going to introduce my good friend, Sam Bennett, who's my instructional coach.
Hi, you introduced me, so that's perfect. Welcome to the Sam and Cris show. We've always dreamed of having some sort of podcast. So thank you for helping us fulfill our dream.
Yeah. First and last, right? Maybe.
That's right.
So we're going to just talk a little bit about questions. We just love this idea of building in questions to, I think, help kids not be disengaged. So this isn't going to be about teachers designing level 1, 2, or 3 questions, but really trying to generate that curiosity about someone that's going on. And so, Sam, there was a book on the second slide. There was a book that you introduced to me like it's longer than that probably because the boys are older.
Probably 10. It's the 10th anniversary.
Is it the 10th anniversary? Yeah. So this book, A More Beautiful Question. And Sam was had 4 or 3, it seemed like 4 sometimes, 3 adolescent boys at home and was really trying to understand them. And she came across this book called A More Beautiful Question about like, how do we ask to learn? And so this was a quote that I just loved so much. You want to read it or you want me to read it?
Go ahead.
Okay. Clearly, it's easier and more efficient to go about our daily affairs without questioning. But when we want to shake things up and instigate change, it's necessary to break free of our familiar thought patterns and easy assumptions. We have to veer off that beaten neural path. And we do this primarily by asking questions. And I think that's so interesting with kids too, right? This idea of like, all right, maybe you always say their questions matter most.
Right. So the fun thing is that Cris and I get to travel together all over the country and meet with different groups, leaders and coaches. And Cris teaches the kids, and then I facilitate the group that gets to watch her model. And she is, throughout our 25-year friendship, as one of the most amazing questioners and listening to questions that I know. And she always starts with this. We always kind of start with self and grow out. So the first thing we're thinking about is like, okay, when do we ask questions as humans? So just think a little bit, like, what are some things that cause you to be curious? What shuts down your curiosity? And when are you unwilling to ask? So, Cris, you are one of the most curious people I know. What's causing you to be curious right now?
My family says I'm just nosy. Well, I think for me, because I'm really kind of a pragmatist, I think for me, there's got to be like a purpose or a relevance. And so like I was thinking about this whole tariff business, this ridiculous tariff business. A year ago, I didn't really care about tariffs. There was no way I was going to dig into tariffs. I didn't really care about them, wonder about them. But now I have all these questions, and I think the questions drive what I read and what I skip and what I don't read. Mm-hmm. And so for me, there's got to be some purpose and relevance. What about you? What makes you curious?
Yeah, and it is definitely that need or curiosity about a person. I find if I'm anxious when I meet a person, asking questions helps lower it. Like Michelle Obama always says, we can't hate people close up.
Yeah.
So, and especially right now, we cannot deny that, 50% of our country thinks differently and voted differently. And so instead of making assumptions, that idea of, okay, I have got to figure this out. So that is something I'm really asking questions of people that I would previously maybe have dismissed, and I'm trying not to dismiss people. So that is really helping me ask questions. What shuts down your curiosity, or when are you unwilling to ask?
Well, I don't like asking questions when there's somebody there that has all the answers.
Yeah.
Right? If the answer's already figured out, like, just tell me the answer.
Why bother? That's right.
Yeah.
I'll just listen.
Like, why bother?
And
so I think about like kids too, right? If they know that we know,
right.
Then just tell them the information.
And I think that is the most fun thing is watching you teach is you'll throw out a question to kids and they'll just, when you're first working with them, they'll just sit and wait because they're used to they're not used to that uncomfortable silence and the teacher just jumping right back in. So you just sort of like, you just stand there and just like shrug and go, I don't know.
Well, and I think that's that piece too of like, okay, I don't really want you to guess what's in my head. I really am curious about this question. It's got more than one answer. We were practicing this earlier the week. You had said something about questioning the questions you love the most evoke an emotional response. And I thought that was so interesting. Like, how do we give kids something curious to first look at or see that's going to evoke, disgust or fear or love or, something to kind of bring them in. Right?
And you're so good at that, like sharing your own stories about that. And I find as a coach, one of my main foundational beliefs is that I should not be asking questions I already know the answer to.
Yeah.
And so that's also when I'm working with teachers, when they're conferring, stop asking questions you know the answer to, because then it's a guess what's in my head, and that shuts down engagement. And so that is something that you are particularly genius.
Yeah, and I noticed that with you with coaching as well.
This year.
All
right. So we're kind of thinking about this engagement, and we're trying to mute disengagement. So we're trying to expand engagement. So this picture, if you've spent any time with Cris and I, you probably see it. And of course, it's in all of Chris's books. But the idea of the types of engagement and the kind of engagement, we always want this picture to pop into people's heads when we talk about engagement, because we think we know engagement when we see it, but breaking it down into these 3 circles and going for that sweet spot right in the middle really makes a huge difference. So the idea of behavioral engagement, I know what to do and when to do it. Sometimes that can just be compliance, right? Kids playing the game of school and what they think their role is just to sit and get. What Cris and I try to expand behavioral engagement in our work is what are the behaviors and habits of scientists and historians and city planners and, readers, writers, thinkers, activists in the world, and trying to really explicitly name those behaviors and use them as learning targets and kind of grow into them for skills. There's also cognitive engagement, that idea of how are the pistons firing, how's the electricity connecting in our brain as we're trying to build those neurons. And here's the thing about cognitive engagement, there's only 2 ways to know if kids are cognitively engaged: what they say out of their mouths and what they say out of their pencils or their keyboard. So that idea of maximizing time on a daily basis for kids to talk and us to listen, and kids to write and us to listen in different ways. The third type of engagement, emotional engagement, is I think the one we all describe when we see it, right? Eyes wide, leaning forward, excited voices. But something also in our research that we've discovered about emotional engagement is it's really this 4 square of emotions and how we can create the conditions around 4 different types of emotional engagement in the classroom. One is student to teacher, right? That relationship. I know you deeply, you know me deeply. We know what each other is reading, writing, talking about, what we care about. We can recommend things to each other, but also taking time to build the student to student, right? Because if we're just trying to bear the entire weight of emotional engagement, our relationship, it's too much. It's too heavy. We try, and unfortunately 50% of teachers drop out of our profession. So that's a huge one. So increasing the student to student connections where they know each other deeply and time in the classroom. Student to self, I know who I am. I understand my variety of identities and how I like to learn and when and what are the topics and what do I connect to and what do I need most to grow. And then the fourth one, student to curriculum, which is where Cris and I spend a lot of our time with groups, is how do we plan for this type of engagement so kids care as much about the content and the skills they're developing as they do about us, as they do about each other, as they do about themselves. All right, there's your 101.
Can I put my 2 cents worth in on the slide?
You may.
As you were explaining those, I was thinking about the whole idea of asking questions. And how sometimes even old, I think little kids ask questions all the time, but as kids get older, that idea of looking at these 3 circles and like, what are the behaviors of a good question asker?
Oh, right.
Like how do we model that for kids? And I've noticed in the chat, some of you are hitting on that idea of like, okay, so like, how can you sometimes make yourself curious when you're not? Because if you're curious, it propels your learning. And then I was thinking about that cognitive engagement as that need to know. And if we're always answering somebody else's questions, that cognitive engagement really shuts down, right? So there's this agency of like, I want to ask my questions. And I think that also ties it in with that idea of like creating conditions for kids to ask that question. When I care about the question, I work harder and I work more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which goes to our planning. All right. So these are some of the reasons why we love questions more than answers. What can a question tell you? So much more than an answer in our experience and in our practice. So I was thinking through like, okay, why do we love questions in our friendship, in the world, and in school? So you kind of took us into that idea of the use of guiding questions, essential questions, daily questions, a nesting of questions as we're trying to figure things out. So in your experience, can you tell us about one of your units that you felt like questions really got kids to the heart and helped them engage even more in the classroom?
Well, we talked a little about, but I think that idea that there's not one right answer.
Yeah.
The gray questions, the questions that have ambiguity, and that idea of, you get to decide what you think the answer is based on your reading and your research, and I don't know if this is disconnected or not, but I keep thinking about Game of Thrones and how you were so into that series and I hadn't watched it, and we were going to be together working the following day where it was the season finale, and I watched the season finale. That was the only thing I watched because I wanted to be able to connect with you, and I knew you'd be talking about it the next day, and I had questions, so I wanted to be able to ask you questions about it because I cared about you. So I think that idea of like, caring about another person, caring about the world, but then also this idea of, maybe on the slide we should change it instead of in school, but change it to learning, because it gives more autonomy to kids, like how your questions fit with your own learning.
I think that idea of breaking the fake of school is that the questions in school connect to the world, right? Like I'm big pop culture, you're big sports.
Yeah.
But because we love each other so much, there are times when I know there's a big game on that I will, I'll build my own background knowledge. When it's the baseball draft, right? Like something I would never care about, I care about because you care about it. We're both really into news and politics and things. So our big overlap for history and all of that works. When I think about our friendship, things that you care about that I don't, I engage in. And then I think the question that I probably ask you the most is, why are you ghosting me?
Okay, so that's just a little background on that. Sam is a voracious reader, reads everything. I am a slow reader. I'm a struggling reader still. And she'll send me things that I don't get back to her as often. I did like the Pope article that you sent me.
Okay, cute.
However, I think it also goes back to questioning, because in our classrooms, we have kids of all different reading levels, right? So like you read so much more than I do, and you process so much more. And so that idea of like questions allow kids to come in at their own entry point. Right. When we start to honor those, right? And I think about this little boy last week. Well, I guess he was in 7th grade, but they were studying evolution. And one of the questions he asked about the Galapagos Islands was, why do birds, there's some birds that drink blood.
Right.
And it was just like, I had never thought about that. The science teacher had never thought about that, but it propelled this whole other path where this kid could kind of start
So
to
it was
dig
this
in.
tiny little factlet that
Yeah.
is connected to how his beak is shaped and what he needs to
Yeah.
survive and thrive. And
the adaptations. And it was just really interesting.
Yeah, that one little factlet that gets to the big one. So you are really good at paying attention to kids' questions to help then drive their engagement and figure out what text you're going to put in front of them next. So talk to us a little bit about when students ask questions, what does it do for them? What does it do for us as people that are trying to connect and drive? And then what does it do for the world when kids get better at asking questions they care about?
Yeah, I think when I left first grade to teach high school, and I would say to kids, okay, well, what do you get about this? And they would say nothing. I was stuck. And then I thought to myself, okay, well, when you don't know anything about a topic, what do you wonder? What are your questions? That's how you build your background knowledge. And so I think that idea of helping kids to figure out like why something matters and that your questions will be honored. I saw somebody write, Sarah, about joy and Dr. Goldie Muhammad's work, and that idea of like, it's joyful when you get to explore your own questions. And I think people who just kind of go through life as adults, never wondering anything, never like there's so much happening in the world right now. Like I can't imagine not having any questions, right? I think question askers, we have to question. And, when we were younger, there was always a bumper sticker, question authority.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Well,
We still have to continue to do that. What about you? Like, I know some of these on the screen are some of our favorite questions that like, when you're working with teachers, how do you get them to go deeper?
Well, I think watching you with kids also helped me. When kids ask a fake question, because they think you just want them to write something on the annotations, you always stop and you go, do you really care about that? You're like, because that doesn't sound very interesting to me. And it always makes me giggle. And so that idea of when we can kind of using all of our senses, right? When we're assessing and like, really, is there energy behind this question? Like you could tell with the kid, why would a bird drink blood? It wasn't just that he wrote the question. It was that there was energy behind it, like gross.
Emotion.
What is that, right? So I think that breaking the fake, because we know how kids can fake it and how grownups, I will say, how grownups can fake it as well. And I'm like, do you really care about that? And why do you care about that? So like asking those follow-up questions that get us to pull that red thread. So we talk a lot about it, our work for kids and grownups is getting their head, hearts, and guts aligned. And then working from that place and working from that core and having everything revolve around and connect to that core. So we are growing better humans on a daily basis when we can. And you're also genius about going, I don't know.
Yeah. When
kids ask and grownups ask such a powerful question, you're like, I don't know, but let's design something to figure it out, or let's dig deeper with a piece of text, or right. That just gets us to keep going and take the next step, which is
it's a lot of work to have to know everything.
It's a lot way too much work.
It's true with older kids too. And you ask them like, do you really care about that? They'll just go, no. Like,
they just tell you straight up.
Find the question that you really care about.
Right.
And I think that's always surprising because we want ones that they care about because that will propel their learning.
Yeah. And so it's funny with grownups, when I ask them the same question, like, do you really care about that? They'll say, no, but my boss does, or my principal does. And I'm like, okay, great. Why do you think your principal cares about that? And is there a nested question that might get to that bigger question that you care about? So I feel like there's always this way to pull and to go deeper. But everything starts with a question.
Yeah. And it's like that idea, like how to make yourself curious. Can you make yourself curious?
Right.
Show that quote, that research quote, because I think sometimes we think we don't have time for kids' questions.
Yeah.
And this is something that's been replicated several times, but that idea that students who asked their own questions showed a greater growth and comprehension than students who simply answered it.
Sure.
And so that idea of like,
because they're not reading for somebody else, then they're reading for themselves.
Yeah. And so that idea of like, how do we make space and time for kids to ask questions? And so, when you're working with teachers and when I'm working with kids, there's always a place for people to leave their questions that we can then share the next day, or we can, maybe find a piece of text that person might care about.
Right. I love when you open day 2 of a demo with kids' questions.
Yeah,
right.
So fun.
It's just always just Beautiful. All right. So
I think a couple people that third column, eliminating the gotcha. I think I saw a couple people already hit on that in the chat.
Getting it.
So smart. Yeah. So
like,
what are these that you wrote down? Are these
so
stems?
this idea of like when teachers and coaches ask questions. So if we're moving from student learning to grown-up learning to get better for students, that idea of what are we trying to figure out when we ask kids questions, right? Are we really just trying to figure out if they know the answer, or are we trying to drive their engagement to keep going? And I think that's a really important thing to think about as a teacher. Like, are there other ways that I can find out what kids know and are able to do without them having to guess what's in my head? I think that is that thing that propels and generates things. I think there are some key questions that build trust and relationship that I think you are genius at. So one of the ones I love is when you're asking kids to take a next step and you're like, are you up for a challenge?
Yeah.
What are some other key questions you know in conferring with kids that you always
Well, and I
go
think
back
you do
to?
this with teachers too that shut down. It's just like, what do you need?
Yeah.
Like, what do you need? How can I help? Right. Just that idea. And sometimes they'll say, I don't know what I need. And then it's an opportunity for me to say, well, here's what I can offer.
Right.
Will any of those help you get back on track? But I think those open-ended, what are you willing to tackle or try? I think you use that with your boys a lot, right?
Yeah. What are you willing? That is
what are you
my
willing to try?
favorite. Yeah. That's my favorite parenting phrase as well. So what are you willing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it works for grown-ups too.
Let's go to that next slide because I think we're getting close to time.
Okay.
We want to show that.
I think something that is something I do want to highlight on one way to eliminate the gotcha is if you know the answer to the question, just put a phrase before it that you can't know. Okay. So like if I'm going to ask teachers, what are the keys to engagement? Okay, that's a gotcha because I have my own list of keys to engagement, but they may have read other researchers so what do you believe matters most to engagement? Or in your experience, where do you see kids most engaged? Or just adding those phrases in front of it. What do you believe about in your experience? What have you noticed about? I can't know those answers.
Oh, I love that. All the years we were working together, I never knew how you got people to talk back. And it's that phrase. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's just those phrases for me that really help teachers dig back in. But I see you do that with kids too.
Good.
I think something that's really interesting that these don't work all the time. Just recently, I think post-COVID, I have seen you ask several kids, are you up for a challenge? And they go, no. No.
Yeah. That was just.
Yeah. That's been recently.
Yeah. So trying to figure out about, okay, well, you want to hear the challenge first and then you can decide. Yeah. And then that sometimes will hook them. And if they say no, then it's okay. You go back, you go to somebody else when you're conferring and come back. But
right. And I've also heard you say when you're up for a challenge, if they say no for you're up for a challenge, what I see you do is model.
Yeah.
You say, okay, so are you bored? Is it feeling too hard? Like what, you just try to get them going on something, which is, it's just so fun to watch your wheels spin, especially with kids that don't want to play.
Yeah. Yeah. When we all have those kind of kids, right?
Yeah.
Just to build that trust. Let's see. Do we have one more on there? I just wanted to show that citation from Grant Wiggins.
All right. So qualities of a good question. This is one of our very, very, very favorite mentor texts based on the work of Wiggins and McTighe, UBD. And this was from a short article way back in the day, I guess 11 years ago now, with Grant Wiggins, the qualities of a good question. So I'll just give you a minute to read through those. Or Cris, do you want to highlight any that you always go to?
I was just reading Tawanda's little reminder that we're getting close to time and that not to forget to join the town hall. That article is a great article that's listed below. And I think we've got PDFs available, right? Can we go to the next little slide?
Oh, we're done.
We're done?
Yeah, that was our last slide.
Yeah, so, go one more. Yeah, so if you want to email either Sam or me, we can send you the PDF of the slides that we kind of blasted through really quickly. We sure appreciate you all. Jessica, do we stay on while people ask questions, or what do we do for this last 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'm just gonna thank you both so much for inviting us into this workshop. It was such a joy and delight. Oh my goodness. We have a private chat with the tech hosts, and people were in there like commenting on how fun it was and how they feel like they're watching a talk show with you too. So I don't know if you have any interest in the future, but you've got a ready and willing audience space here already. So,
Thank you.
If anybody is watching and who has, can get you hooked up, like,
That's right.
We're ready to go.
Right.
We're ready for the Cris and Sam talk show. So thank you both so
Thanks,
much.
Everyone. Thanks,
I'm just going to introduce us, or to remind us that we have our town hall coming up, and we will see both of you somewhere soon. So thank you so much for your time today. If you are still around with us live right now, we invite you to join us with our closing starting in just a few moments, with our founding director, Cris Lehman, with his closing remarks. And following that will be our town hall Zoom gathering. You can see in the chat link to register. You can still join us live at 1 p.m. Eastern. But again, we thank Cris and Sam so much for their time and their much needed joy today. And thank you all for your energy in the chat and for joining us on this day of learning.